wish you a Merry Christmas and a crappy New Year. I remember Christmas. Here's my old story anyway. One Christmas, a good few years ago, a wee carpenter called Joey suddenly found himself a father. Now, for all the world, he didn't know how, as that young one Mary now, who he'd been doing a bit of a line with. Nothing too serious, you understand, as he was a bit of a lad and didn't want to be stuck with a mop once the weekend came in and the boys went out to the inns for a bit of gargle, wine and the crack down Bethlehem way. There he was, trying his best to get into her cags, and she, or so she seemed, was a bit of a Catholic, though she wasn't one, as they hadn't been invented at that stage. She wouldn't entertain him not one bit, not a whiff of hoop, or a sign of her giving in to his indirect advances. She was the proverbial no-go area, the Holy Mary we speak of. Or she could have been a lesbian, though I'm not sure if they were invented in those days either. And anyway, Joey had never heard of them. He was baffled, dumbfounded, totally at sea when she out and told him earlier that year, it was April to be precise, when she missed her period and was a bit down in the dumps with the morning sickness. Well, with Mary, it was more the afternoon sickness, as she was a wee bit lazy and usually slept through the mornings and only surfaced in the afternoon, as she didn't have a job neither. Unemployment was a problem even then, and I don't know if they called it that or just playing out of work, but anyway, Mary was a bit of a dull scrounger like a lot of us today, living it up on people like Joey's hard-earned taxes and lazing about the house all day doing sod all. Anyway, she appeared on his doorstep one morning with the most hilarious story Joey had ever heard of in his life, saying that some bloke named Gabriel called into her gaff one night and told her that she was required by God to bear his son, and that she could do so without being promiscuous and remain a virgin until she found the right person with whom to lose her virginity with. After marriage, she hinted at Joey. She then said that this Gabriel bloke flew out of her window and away, and that was all she heard from him until a while later, when she was just about to go to bed and had all but her cacks off, when bingo, the conniving little peeping Tom appeared at the end of her bed again, apologising for his untimely interruption and vowing never to enter her room again while she was naked. She scolded him, and she said that only because she was a good and devoted servant of God's, she'd probably have filed a lawsuit against him and had him done for sexual harassment, or at least trespassing. Gabriel was adamant that it would not occur again, and asked her if she was ready to do God's will. Mary consented and asked for the details. He told her the conditions and told her that she must call the child Jesus, a name which she nor no one else in the whole of Judea nor all the Middle East had ever heard of. Not even Saddam Hussein nor Mulberry Bush had heard of this name before. She wasn't sure whether she liked it or not, but after a few hours arguing and fussing, you know how women are over baby names, she went through the litany. Deco, Albert, Gino, Joe, after her husband-to-be, PA or Peter for short, and even a girl's name Emily came up, but they were all eventually shelved for the unlikely name Jesus. What the hell did that mean, eh? What would other kids call it in school, eh? Jesus, J is fluid, Janie Mac, Jesus, Mary and Joseph. She didn't know, but it was even more sickened when she was told that she couldn't call its second name after her own White House. She had to call it Christ, Jesus Christ. She was livid, but eventually calmed down when she was promised almost certain salvation when she died, and a very high position in heaven, over the angels, saints, and directly next to God himself. If there was ever a job worth applying for, she told herself, this is it. So she agreed, and that very night she felt something weird inside her, or at least she thought she did. But it could have been the curry roll and chips she'd eaten earlier on the way home from the pub, where she'd been out drinking with Mary Magdalene's older sister, Maggie Magdalene, a close friend of hers who once confessed to having a very strong fancy for Pontius Pilate's old fella, but couldn't stand his attitude towards Jews, nor his habit of washing his hands after everything, a trait which he handed down to his son Pontius, who got his name from his father, but he had his mother's eyes and temper, and looked like Telly Savalas out of Kojak. Not much hair on top, in fact none. Anyway, Joey was absolutely blown away by this story and spent the next 7 to 8 months down the pub trying to come to terms with it. Is Mop pregnant by God? A likely story. He spent 2 months looking all over the Holy Land for blokes called Gabriel and checking them out for wings and halos and things. He was sure she'd done the dirt on him. Was his mot a slag all along? Were his mates laughing at him? Was he going mad? What would his mother say? His mot pregnant before marriage? No one would believe it wasn't him. He had only one way out now, and that was to marry the bitch. And anyway, he fancied her. It wouldn't look the Mae West tour down the Labour Exchange claiming the unmarried mothers. He'd be shamed into it. And anyway, she could never blame him for weird traits in the child's character which may occur in the future. Sure, he might as well go along with it and drag her down the aisle. At least it'd be an excuse for a piss up if nothing else. But that nagging doubt in the back of his mind never really disappeared. It would always be an affront to his manhood that Mary would never be able to bear any of his children. No little Joey's. And would he ever find out for sure if Jesus was the Son of God, or a cock and bull story invented by Mary to cover up her promiscuity whilst pretending to be all pious and religious? Well, they got married, and despite all the rumours about shotgun weddings and impotency, they seemed to be coping well with the pregnancy, onwards through the summer months and into the autumn and then on to the winter. There was a bad winter that year. Gang loads of snow, sleet and hail swept the Holy Land. Not the usual weather for a Middle Eastern country near the equator. Must have been a freak year that year, but snow it did like it had never snowed before, and wasn't our bowl Joey and Mary caught up in it whilst on a journey into Bethlehem to do a British shopping in preparation for the newborn baby, who they didn't need to get a scam for to see if it was male or female, cause Mary was adamant about her story and Joseph said he'd wait and see. Really, he wanted it to be a girl so that he could expose her story and rub her nose in it, but he'd have to wait and go along with it for now. The doubt never really left him, and at weird times of the day, he'd take to talking intently to himself, trying to suppress these doubts and questions. Mary thought he must be a bit of a loon when she heard it at him one day, but put it down to praying and smiled to herself. Soon it would be all over. Anyway, the Passover or some such festival season was approaching, and everyone from the suburbs and townships around Bethlehem, not the one in the USA mind, would head towards the town centre and give thanks to the Lord for some unearthly reason. Why couldn't they give thanks at home? Beats me, but that's the way the story goes. Anyway, Joey and Mary arrived in Bethlehem late in the evening and were having an awful time getting a bed and breakfast or a hotel. They were knackered after the day's travelling and were dying for a place to rest, get a bit of grub and a couple of neck oils. Not Mary though, she couldn't drink during the late pregnancy in case it would damage the baby, and anyway she might have a few dishes and clothes to be washing whilst Joey went out for a few scoops. But alas, no, they couldn't even get into a pub. The pubs were black with Arabs and Jews and the odd Roman or two drinking and remembering the good old days. And poor old Joey and Mary were at the mercy of the bouncers on the doors of the pubs, and even then bouncers like they are today are the lowest form of life known to man, and were the most brain-dead obnoxious persons, for want of a better word, Mary had ever come across, and she had to restrain Joey a few times from putting a few bricks through the windows of the places. Yes, he would have enjoyed that. He remembered the times now when he and a few of the lads used to go out trying to get into bars, and they used not get served because their robes weren't the cleanest and their hair was long, and they would cause unmentionable amounts of havoc and damage and then revert back to their own local JJ's, a small tavern on Angel Street, which was always cool and where all the cool people hung out, even in those days, before hippies and punks and mods and rockers, etc. There were cool dudes who dressed up in weird robes and wore weird jewellery, and Joey used to be one of them crew. He treasured those memories. They kept him through the long winter evenings, just thinking about those things. Anyway, the evening was getting on and colder with it, and Mary was beginning to nark, and especially when Joey called her Bubble 07, because she was out like a balloon with the pregnancy, and she was very conscious of her looks. So hadn't she won a few beauty competitions and rows of Bethlehems in her day, so she prided herself and comforted herself with these thoughts any time she looked in the mirror. Now she would say, I'm not a slag nor nothing like that. I wouldn't enter a wet t-shirt competition, not like all those other brazen hussies in the parish. But I do consider myself to be a fine looking woman, and especially in me blue robe that looks a bit like a nun's habit. Yeah, she thought to herself, I'm alright, but this cold is getting on me wick. Anyway, they hunted high and low for the guest house, but alas, not an ounce of luck did they have. All the out-of-towners were up for the day and had swallowed up every space available, and so Mary and Joey had to sleep at Rough, so it seemed. until finally some posh farmer took pity on them and gave them refuge in his barn, along with a couple of cows, sheep, a horse or two and a couple of rats. He broke his miserable, greedy heart. His name was Shylock McMoneyholder, and Mary was the first to comment on his stinginess. Still, it was better than a park bench, and so they set about making it comfortable. Well, they had that just done when, bang, Mary goes into labour. What a time to go into labour, Joey said to himself and fumed. Not a doctor in sight, nor anyone except the aforementioned animals, who were not much help when it came to delivering a baby. Joey was on his own now, and he knew it. The Son of God was at his mercy, and he alone could have changed the ending of this story, but he didn't. And he came through the birth scene with flying colours. Mary couldn't believe it, and she asked him why he didn't become a doctor instead of an underpaid chippy. He just gasped and dropped to his knees when he saw that it was indeed a boy, and now he had to concede to himself that Mary had indeed been truthful. Well, he was absolutely flabbergasted, and while he was gibbering and muttering, the baby nearly died of exposure. He came to his senses just in time, and with one sweep, he clattered the sheep across the air and sent it sprawling across the barn. "Get out of that bleeding manger, you squatting blighter, or I'll have you shagged like the rest of your family." Mary scolded him for swearing, and he apologised and muttered something about mutton sandwiches, but got a big load of straw and hay and filled the manger with it until it was soft and gentle enough to put the baby on. Soon it was ready, and the little Jesus was popped in and covered with straw and hay to keep him warm. And Joey then set about trying to block out the moonlight, which seemed a lot brighter tonight than he'd ever seen it. And the fact that the barn roof had holes in it didn't help. He did his best to cover them in, and then he looked up, and all of a sudden he realised that it wasn't the moon which was the problem. He could see that down the far end of the sky, looking small and insignificant compared to the light which was directly above the barn. He went outside and looked up. Wow, he thought, it must be a flashback from acid or something like that. I'm tripping. Hey Mary, I'm tripping, look at that light, Mary. Mary ran to the barn door and looked. She was almost blinded by the light too. Ah, Joey, come here, you're not tripping. That's a star out there. God must have sent it to celebrate the birth of his son. Well, Joey came in a little shaken but relieved. He hadn't done acid for around 3 years now, and that's how long it takes to leave your system, he told himself. Well, I wish to hell God would just take it away again and stop keeping us awake. But no such luck. He didn't, and Joey and Mary and the baby eventually nodded off a few hours later and were just nestled nicely into the hay when suddenly there was a knock on the door. "Who the hell is that?" bellowed an now totally pissed off Joe. "It's only us," came the reply. "Who the hell is us?" Joey roared again, waking the baby and Mary with his screaming. "We are 3 wise men," came the reply. "Why don't you piss off," said Joey, "and stop annoying us? But we've brought presents for the baby. Gold, frankincense and a mirror," came the plea from outside. "Gold!" roared Joey. "All right, bring it in here, you got 2 minutes. Give Mary that mirror and stuff the frankincense up your asses on the way out. How much gold is there? Gives a look. Right, there's the baby. Are yous child molesters or what? Now, scram!" And he did. Joey and Mary eventually fell asleep a few hours later that night and were a lot happier after they got that gold. 3 wise men indeed. Sure, if they were wise men, they wouldn't be giving us all that gold and then having to live in that sort of weather. Anyway, Joey and Mary and the baby Jesus got a bit of kip that night, and afterwards set home the following morning and were never heard of again. Probably led a very boring life and died insignificantly. I don't know, and to tell you the truth, I couldn't give a crappy New Year.